Hi, everybody. Lynn Cox here, clinical hypnotherapist. I'm launching right into it. I want to talk a little about triggers for those who have experienced domestic violence as well as childhood abuse. So, I think we hear a lot today about trigger warnings. I'm talking about triggers for people who have experienced real, actual trauma, not just having a sensitivity to content or topics that they don't prefer. So, triggers can include everything from, sights, sounds, smells, different thoughts, different things that remind you of whatever it was that you experienced in the past. So, I'll give you a couple of examples, a couple of examples that I have experience with. Um, you know, One person who had been assaulted as a child, having a particular trigger to people who had the physical characteristics of her abuser, and those included a very particular type of face shape as well as a body shape, and struggling with that. Also, another experiencing triggers, seeing children of that same age that she was during the time of her abuse. Um, another another example, somebody who was in a violent relationship, being triggered by somebody with tattoos in a similar place that her abuser had. Um, smells and sounds actually can be really, really strong triggers. So, why is acknowledging triggers really important and really legitimate triggers, and what can people do about it, and why are they problematic? So, you know, when people experience triggers when they haven't effectively dealt with whatever their past trauma or experience has been, it can be extremely debilitating. Sorry, I have to sneeze. Pardon me. And almost kind of put them back into the place and the space of experiencing that trauma. So activating the fight, flight, or freeze response, that is like almost an automatic reaction. That is debilitating for a number of reasons. Anytime we're in our fight, flight, freeze response, in particular when it's not necessary, and it's typically not necessary in most cases, it produces a massive detrimental load on somebody's physical symptoms, and also mental health. If you consider, people in the world of like, optimization and being, developing in business and success, etc., talk about the need for focus and how difficult it can be to, refocus on a task or a priority once your attention is diverted. So if you're constantly being triggered, it makes it difficult to function optimally in in life and in the world. And in kind of more extreme situations, it can inhibit people from living a life that they want to live. For example, the woman who was triggered by seeing children of an age and being constantly brought back into that experience of experiencing sexual abuse as a child, that kind of thing can prohibit people from. This person actually really wanted to have children and didn't, because of that fear of seeing children at those ages, those ages where they're fairly defenseless. For a lot of women who have escaped from domestic abuse, many of them often do prefer the safety of solitude, versus being triggered in future relationships. So if triggers are constantly putting people into a heightened state of arousal, it's not healthy for you physically. It can really impact performance and focus and enjoyment of life because it's a constant just kind of pulling people out of the here and the now. And then it can also, depending on what those triggers are, can stand in the way of people pursuing aspects of life that are important to them. For example, relationships, parenthood, even going for jobs and etc. And the fact of the matter is we can't, there's very little we can control. And in fact, it really comes down to only one thing that we can control. Unless you're going to be a hermit, stay in your home, not have to interact with the outside world. Most people can't do that, and that sounds like a pretty limited life. We can't control those things that are going on around and outside of us, but what we can control is our perception, our perspective, and people do have a more of an ability to regulate their nervous systems and self-regulate than many do believe until they experience it. So one of the first steps with triggers, one thing I do always recommend people do is always carry a notebook around with you and notice when something comes up and you start to feel that trigger response, whatever that is for you. And people do have a fight flight or freeze response. It could be very different. And then start to document it. Have a notepad and a pen or a pencil handy and document it. Becoming aware of what they all are is the first step. Awareness of those triggers is the first step. The second would be deciding that you want to overcome feeling and being triggered. So there does have to be a bit of a belief, or I don't even want to say hope. There has to be some kind of a belief that it is possible to overcome them. And one of my wisest teachers has talked about how people are either pushed by, serious pain, like the pain of experiencing something is enough to for some people to really make change and really become dedicated to change, but also the prospect of having a very alluring, an amazing vision of what you'd prefer your experience in life to look like. So you can either be really inspired or you can be really pushed by pain. And quite honestly, if you want to come over or get over being triggered all of the time, either or will work. Um, it's more enjoyable to be inspired by examples versus just feeling so much pain. But both of those experiences can be the triggers, if you will, for people to change. And then there are a variety of techniques that you can use. This writing down, what that will do, the identification and writing down, that will cause a different mechanism to start to happen internally. So versus smelling something or seeing something and immediately being triggered and kind of going down that rabbit hole, you're changing the sequence of events. That in and of itself is essentially a rewiring. And then there are a variety of grounding, breathing techniques, and even just noticing, okay, what is it that I'm feeling? Where am I feeling this in my body? How is my breath? What are the thoughts that are jumping into my mind? Noticing, documenting, and then you can start to very deliberately and consciously change that chain of events. And then, grounding, breathing, getting more into the body. Those are really good exercises and activities. And then, as always is true with things like this, making a decision to experience change is number one. So I hope everyone's having a great day, and I'll be on soon.